This is In Your Business.
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 This is In Your Business for the UMSL Business Podcast.
Hi, this is Dr. Allie Helfrich for In Your Business with UMSL Business, gearing up for the annual MDMC conference and excited to chat with one of our talented guest speakers today, Christina Costello. I'm currently enrolled in the Digital Marketing and Social Media Graduate Certificate Program here at UMSL, as I previously earned my doctorate in Textile and Apparel Management at the University of Missouri-Columbia. As a career academic, I am eager to speak with our guest industry professional today about their upcoming session at the virtual MDMC conference starting in just 41 days, and get a sneak peek on industry secrets they might be sharing during their talk. This podcast will be virtually hosted using StreamYard to maintain the highest COVID safety standards. The recorded podcast will be available on the UMSL Business YouTube channel, available free of charge to all listeners. First of all, I would like to say thank you for joining us today and all of our viewers for checking out this video. And today, like I already mentioned, we're going to be speaking with Christina Costello, who is going to be live broadcasted on April 28th at 3:10 p.m. During our conference week. So hi, Christina. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Allie. How are you? Good,
thanks. How are you?
Good. Would you prefer me to call you Dr. Helfrich or Allie?
Oh, no, please just call me Allie. Totally academic standards for Dr. Helfrich. So thanks for asking, but no, just Allie is great. Thank you. So to start off our little podcast today, I wanted to just give you the floor for a few minutes and give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you are at in your career.
100%. So one, thank you for the time today. I'm actually currently with Anheuser-Busch. In my talk, I'll actually have one of our agency partners there as well to highlight some of the creative as well as the strategic part of what I do. My current role is Chief of Staff and Senior Director of Strategy at AB. And I work most directly with the VP of Strategy and Insights as well as our CMO, Marcel Mercandes, to build the strategic storytelling of the team. I also lead a team of financial experts, and that's over $1 billion in our marketing package budget for the total US. And it's really a blend of bringing the right ideas, the best priorities, and the best investment strategy to ensure we have profitable growth as a business. Before that, I spend a lot of time on the brand side with big brands like Michelob ULTRA, Bud Light, Budweiser, and the seltzer portfolio as well.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of responsibility day to day, as well as a lot of moving parts. How do you feel like you manage all of those different responsibilities at the same time?
I have a very great team. I've been really lucky in simplicity being a big part of where my VP, Daphne Hefferner, and I are very much in line on making sure that we have deep focus on our teams, and strategically we try to invest not only our time but also the money of not only our money but also our time. Both of them are very important, obviously. But beyond that, I think it's also understanding what consumers need and trying to be really clear that the things we do on a daily basis actually deliver outside of the organizations. I think that's been an easy way to dictate how we talk about the meetings we take, to the conversations we have. If they're not impacting the world outside of the PowerPoint or the world outside of the conference room, then they're not very relevant long term. They're necessary, but not the key parts of our day.
I really understand exactly what you're talking about with the consumer focus, because as an academic, no matter what class I'm teaching, I always am talking about how important the consumer is no matter what you're doing. And if you don't have the consumer at the center of what you're doing, or at least in the forefront of your mind, then how do you know what the consumer is going to want or how it's going to meet their needs? So I'm sure that's kind of leading into maybe your talk for the upcoming MDMC conference, which is 3 Steps to Building a Brand Consumers Love. Is your colleague that's going to be speaking with you at the conference, they are also from AB InBev, is that correct?
No. So one of our agency partners, we have several that are fantastic, and one might actually be coming on last minute, so we'll see. And he's got an amazing talk. I work predominantly with 2 big agencies here in Texas, Infinite Agency and 4A Factory were the 2 major ones, as well as Lerma. All three are great. But the one that I'm highlighting this week in my conversations with you guys today, as well as in the future, Jonathan Ogle was a big part of my initial career, and he helped to build Michelob ULTRA alongside of me in the initial phases before it was a big brand like it is now. And he and I really want to focus on how you build brands that appeal to consumers as they evolve in not only their life cycle, but also the macro trends of the country, right? As you've seen with COVID and other things, there's some enduring occasions that don't leave as the consumers change. So things like health and wellness stayed. Things like trying to find ways to host at home never really went away. They just got bigger and better and, more interesting. So there's a couple macro occasions that we like to focus on, and unpacking that from the consumer needs state was something that he helped to cultivate in me as a partner. And then I helped to cultivate in his agency with the brands and the stories. So amazing opportunity to highlight him as one of my big partners and reveal some unique ways that he also sees from the creative side how to build and hero creativity at the forefront.
Sounds really exciting. So speaking about that session, is this the first time you're going to be speaking at the MDMC conference? And can you speak to us a little bit about that, and as well as how you kind of made your way along the path to be a speaker at the MDMC conference?
Yeah, so interesting path. I actually moderated, I think it was 2019. And it was a really cool opportunity to hear some other individuals speak, to be able to interact directly with the speakers and see the content live. And it gave me an opportunity uniquely to work with Harry Drake specifically, as he was the one cultivating it. He and I actually sat down at a random Starbucks in New York City when I first moved there. And he just happened to also be there as well and said, hey, I know you have a relationship with the university through my connections. And, I'd really love for you to talk at this. And I was like, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about. But, and I couldn't frankly get together with the idea in my head of what I wanted the speech to be. But I said, how about this? For year one, I'll just come moderate. I'll support however you need. And then in the future, we'll look at conversations. So it was a good opportunity to get my feet wet, see everything, understand where I could potentially add value. And that was great for that year. And now I continue to sit on the advisory board, mostly focused on curriculum council for University of Missouri, especially around marketing. And with that, this opportunity came pretty seamlessly, which was a blessing.
I think Perry likes to suggest coffee because I also have not met Perry in person because of COVID. So I've taken all my classes online, but chatting with him, it was funny because we mentioned that it would be nice to sit down and have coffee sometime if and when going with when that time becomes available. So I think that might be a really fun thing to do in the future as well. I've kind of noticed a theme so far of your career path and even your path to MDMC, which is networking and how it's kind of helped you get kind of where you are, both career-wise as well as to the conference, but also mentioning how you've kind of helped your colleague John, in his way at his agency. So thinking about students that may be attending the conference or watching the conference digitally, in this case for this year, could you share how you feel like your academic background and maybe any specific courses you've taken? And I know it might have been a while out since you're obviously very established in your career, that were just really advantageous to you to get you where you are today, or maybe, courses that if someone's interested in a similar area to what you work in. I know that obviously AB InBev is a huge world-renowned company. So I'm sure many aspire to be in similar positions, that just courses in general that you thought, now looking at your career, were really helpful to get you where you are today.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my relationship is indirect with University of Missouri, but knowing some of the academic staff there's a ton of really cool courses, both that take you on global trips to things that teach you, how to use social media platforms inside the classroom, to sports marketing. My undergrad is in business management, and I would say, ironically, my biggest moment or pivot in my business career from an academic perspective was actually an elective. It was my philosophy class at Kansas State. I read about, the Thoreaus, the Ralph Waldo Emersons of the world, the Immanuel Kant. So all of those really taught me how to position a story and really force people to think differently. And I think the first part of great business and great marketing is provoking people to think differently and more curiously about the things that we do every day as routines can be examined much more thoroughly than they are at times. And I think the same way about creative still is you've got to find unique angles and really ask why we're doing the things we're doing every day to get to good creative. And I think that philosophy class stuck with me for better or worse. I'm sure my professors at Kansas State would not be excited to hear that. But it was a tremendous opportunity to read great writers and understand how to tell great stories through very simple narratives. Beyond that, something at my MBA was University of South Florida. The things that were most impactful there were business finance. At the time, I was not a huge math connoisseur, right? I hadn't collected a ton of electives in it, and I didn't love it. But the business finance course was a really big challenge in a great way for me. It forced me to really hone that skill and understand how to develop a perspective on the ROI that marketing needs to have in order to be sustained. Mm-hmm. And also when to invest in a brand, how much to invest. That was a really good understanding for me on the business side of marketing, where typically the expense, not the revenue. So looking at how we're seen from a total P&L perspective was useful. Then we got to do 2 projects. One was with Fox Sports, where we worked on creating a campaign that they actually used at one of their sports partners' advertising platforms. And it was a really cool opportunity to pitch not only a concept, but also see like the winning one come to life on social and in stadium. So that was amazing. And then a capstone course that I did was really a consulting for a small business, where we had to reorg their company. We had to structure their financials. We had to give recommendations on how to generate more revenue. And it was a small sort of performance sports facility in Tampa. So it was really cool to get to like really dig into the financials, and I actually worked on the restructuring of the people side of it. So that was fun for me, and just seeing strategically how all of it comes together and how important people are in your operation.
Definitely. And so you talked about your MBA a little bit already, but what led you to pursue your MBA? I know a lot of students today, especially maybe when the economy is in a little bit of a crunch, they're graduating seniors, like, I'm not sure what the next step is. Maybe I should just get an MBA. Seems like or get a graduate degree. Seems like a common factor that I see as a professor. So I was just curious what led you to your MBA, which obviously seems like it's been very beneficial. And, if you had a direction you were interested in going when you did pursue that path.
Yeah, so I always my story is a little different. I started off in sales, and I was in a sales leadership training program with Nestle at the time. And even upon starting, I was like, oh no, this isn't what I want to do. And, I stuck it out for 2.5, almost 3 years, because it was a tremendous opportunity. I think, when you get those sort of training management experiences, you get to see a lot fast. And for me, it was about, I've learned a lot. I've managed a team of almost 20 people. And I know I want to do marketing. And at the time, I was at a big CPG where they're pretty old school of like, yes, everyone wants to do marketing, spend about 5 to 10 years here, or get your MBA. And I was like, or get my MBA. I was like, okay, so I'm going to go for the or. I'm not going to be patient. I don't want to be outdated when I finally make it. So that was the reason I specifically pursued my MBA, was to pivot my career. And I think those are the 2 reasons when I talk to some individuals I mentor. It's 1, you're doing a career pivot, or 2, you've truly hit a limit in your opportunity, whether that's, the real glass ceilings that exist and you're seeing that people are passing you, or it's just in order to get the job you dream of, like you've got to have some of those requirements. Those are the 2 times I really recommend it. If it's not something that's a deep value for your organization and the time is what's really important, which at my current company is the case, then I think it's advantageous to stay, and especially in times with economic downturn, not to take on the debt. But when you really know what you want, I think that's when you go for it. And if you're not sure, I always say pause, work a little, because as you work, you find what you want. And then when you go to invest in your academic, you don't just sit in a sort of a waiting period. You're really invested in your MBA or your graduate degree.
I can totally relate to that because similar situation with myself. I probably never would have guessed that after I finished a PhD and 9 years of college, I was ever going to go back to school. But the similar thing happened to me. I really wanted to pivot more into just digital marketing and marketing opposed to just specific marketing and management of like textile and apparel industry, which is typically what I teach now. So to me, I thought, okay, going back to school is my way to do this. It's a very in demand and in need area. And really the classes that I've taken have been so beneficial to me because I know what I want to do with them. So similar to what you're saying, understanding what you're going to do when you attain that degree, I think is really important and excellent advice for any student watching or even professional who is considering maybe, a transition in career, because sometimes you do need to have that academic credentialing to back up the, work experience. So I think that's a really great tip. And honestly, I wish that I would have thought about that more thoroughly before I invested so much time in the academics that I did, because as I taught more and got to know more friends who work in marketing and just different jobs that exist, I was like, wow, there are so many things I probably would have also liked to do besides teaching, but it's kind of worked out on its own, I guess. So it provides a good work-life balance.
Exactly.
Do you feel like your job provides a good work-life balance right now? I was curious about that because, like I said, the responsibility of your role seems very, very high, and obviously in demand with, as things change. And you talked about how the platform is changing due to COVID and just all the different things that, the consumer goes through in their life. So how do you find good work-life balance? I feel like everyone wants to know about that right now with COVID and working from home. You're working from home now? Did you work from home before?
No. So I've been really
Okay.
fortunate. And I think this is where it's interesting. And I sometimes, going back to your conversation on like the longer I stayed in marketing, the more I was like, oh, I should have gotten a PhD in psychology. Dang it. So I think there's always more to be learned, right? But I think for me, balance has changed in definition. It's just over time. I think when you get into the early parts of my career, I was like, I'll sacrifice a ton. I'll say yes to every opportunity. And I'll set boundaries around what that looks like, but I'm just going to go. And you'll see from my resume, every 18 to 24 months, I was changing jobs. I was moving cities, like lots of sacrifice. Professionally, I got far quickly because of that. And I think as a female, having that MBA and saying yes to just about everything, despite it's going to uncomfortable cities I don't know anyone and things like that, those challenges in themselves really helped my career. The balance now is, outside of COVID, understanding what are my true boundaries around, like, as I get older, community is more important. So I'm in my 30s. I'm like, do I have kids? Is community important? Friendships, if you're moving every 18 months, are challenging. So professionally, you start to learn that balance is like, oh, wow, I have to really set a tone for what not just my title is, but what my life looks like, and sort of backward engineer into what roles allow me to have that. Now with COVID, I feel blessed as a female, because I think what you're seeing is women are much more reluctant, and you'll see that in the data as well, to go back to the office than males are. And I think that's because women were so used to like the idea of having to do it all, like cook, clean, grocery shop, take the kids, walk the dogs, do the career, all the things. Like now that commute being stripped away, and I don't even have kids, I just have a dog, but with my team, with my role, like the removal of that 30, 45-minute commute allows me to be much more efficient and empowered in how I spend my day. Now, of course, I'll go back to the office, because sometimes meeting with the CMO on Zoom gets tough. And there's certain planning meetings that you just wish you could do in person, and networking opportunities that you need. But from a day-to-day perspective, I think my balance has become building an expectation of what I'll deliver, saying no to the things that aren't a priority, and being much more generous with my time, in some ways and very strict with my time in others. When I say no, it's really holding that no, and it can be uncomfortable. And also just, I find the biggest part of my balance is learning how to manage other people's expectations. Whether or not that's saying, no, we're not delivering tonight. 'Cause frankly, I'm not going to consider staying up till 4 a.m. because this isn't a priority. Or if it's, things like, Friday, I'm going to take off because I'm flying. And in my past life, I would have taken the meeting from the airport. And now I'm like, that's not important for me right now. And I have great people on my team. And that's the other part of balance, I think, is hiring as you move up, hiring and coaching people so that when you step away, they feel empowered to fill your shoes as if they were, you. And I think that's an important part of leadership, is building people to believe that they are capable of doing their job at the highest level and your job if needed.
Definitely. Looking at the hiring and coaching that you were talking about, what type of qualities do you think really make a candidate stand out whenever you're looking to fill a position? And it could be very specific or in general, because obviously you have a vast array of different positions that you're probably hiring for, but just in general, what qualities do you feel like really stand out to you when you're looking to hire a new candidate?
So there's like 4 traits that I look for, but there's one sort of school of thought that I was coached early on in my career on at Nestle, and my GM at the time was Tommy Cash, who was just like this epic individual. And he said, Christina, there's skill and there's will, and I can coach skill, and I need the employee to have will. Now, will is motivation, right, on Maslow's hierarchy. It's do you belong? It's do you have esteem? Have you found self-acceptance? Will is fluid now, as we come to understand, but I think it's finding people that have the skills or want to build them, and that have the will and are excited to learn and do to the capabilities that they've built, right? And then teaching them beyond. But the 4 traits I look for when I hire, especially from a marketing perspective, are curiosity, integrity, which along with that is honesty, and then vulnerability. Most of what I do enjoy about coaching and leading is allowing people to step into roles that are almost bigger than themselves. But that requires me to work with people that can ask bold questions, which is the curiosity. Integrity and honesty are holding themselves and me accountable to the standard and or best, and being honest with me when we're not there. And sometimes that's me not being, in my integrity, or them not being in theirs, but that honesty and that vulnerability of like, hey, I don't think this is where it needs to be, or I think we should push this further. That takes a lot of vulnerability, especially if you're early on in your career. So obviously you have to do it with thoughts, knowledge, and sometimes data. But I think those 4 components to me are the key things I look for in an individual, because that's what builds the will, which is the hardest part of coaching.
I'm sure those tips will be very valuable to anyone watching this. Speaking about your session coming up in 41 days, I can't believe we're most of the way through March already, I guess. Your session, as we already mentioned, is going to be April 28th, and it is a live broadcast session. And it's going to be at 3:10 p.m. titled 3 Steps to Building a Brand Consumers Love. Could you give us maybe a little 30-second look into what you're going to be speaking about? I know you spoke briefly about it earlier, but maybe a little preview for our listeners.
Yeah, the goal of it is really to help build brands with the consumers at heart. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying with the vulnerability piece of like, humans, are very complex, and understanding all of their needs. We look at Maslow's hierarchy a lot, at least I do. Understanding their needs, understanding how your brand creates solutions for the things they need in ways that are, surprising and value adding and delightful, right? You want to be like, wow, this is something I didn't even know I needed, and it's so helpful. And I think there's a lot of things like that where, as you build a brand, how do you sustain not just against their need, but also against the things that they love, the things that they connect to. And I look at Nike a lot as inspiration, because they've built a brand that stands for things, that has points of view on social causes, and it becomes a brand they love because it's deeper than just a purchase and deeper than just a shoe or a shirt. It's about who they are and their identity. And I think that's the key of the conversation that Jo and I will try and talk about.
I often have this battle with my students that we just kind of talk about, because really I don't feel there's one right answer to this question, but it reminds me of the battle of the chicken or the egg, which came first, the consumer demand for a product or the marketing pitch. So I'd like to get your input on that, because consumers will say, well, I didn't need it, or I didn't need to buy it, but the marketing was so good, or I just, I was convinced to buy it. And then I feel like people who work for brands might say, well, the consumer, we saw the need for the product, so then it was developed or changed or edited to fit that consumer need. So do you have any perceptions or thoughts about that kind of, which came first, the consumer need or the marketing for the product?
I do. The need first, always. Like if you look at health and wellness, the history behind that trend is we ate more sugar, we got fatter, we got into fitness, and then we went, oh wow, it's more than that. Just running a mile doesn't necessarily change my body significantly. Mm-hmm. I have to think about food. I have to think about beer. I have to think about what I'm drinking, what I'm eating, right? So I think then the need is I have to not be part of that statistic or that fear, right? Like you don't want to be, even if you are, you don't want that long-term for yourself. And I think we all find ways to balance our needs and wants against those. But yeah, always needs first. Because then when you look at like Michelob ULTRA, it had been around for, I want to say 20 years, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter because no one needed it. And so it was like, it could sit on the shelf for a decade and make a couple million, but it blew up when people realized like, oh, what I'm putting into my body is just as important as what I'm exerting in energy.
That's so interesting to think about, because I am also in my 30s. So I feel like Michelob ULTRA is not that old of a product. So when you talk about 20 years, I'm like, well, wow. It's maybe been around about the same time I turned 21. But again, at 21, I probably didn't care about what I was putting into my body either. So I think that's a really great point. And the psychological aspect behind all of that, to me, shows such the connection between marketing and psychology, which I have friends who have psychology degrees, but they work in marketing because it is so relatable. Actually, not even relatable, interconnected, I would say, instead of relatable for sure. So that's super exciting. I'm so excited to have your input for that. I'll definitely weigh that in with my next class I teach when we have that debate. So
I'm always happy to come talk to if you need me.
Oh, yes, I will definitely have to utilize my new network connection. So, okay, so thinking about your very notable career, I also noticed that you are a freelance writer on your LinkedIn. So I didn't know if you could share with me a little bit if that's a hobby of yours, or, how did you get into that, and what topics do you like to write about?
So I've always been, at some level, a dabbler in writing, right? It was like I had a blog back in like 2011 before they were cool, and I deleted it from the internet because it was like, oh, I should get rid of that. And I'm a published writer, so I've published one book, and it's more of a fictional novel. And then I also publish on Medium under Christy Alexander, so that's like my publishing name to like separate my two personal brands. But I've always done a mix of short stories or poetry or things like that, because in my first sales career, I couldn't write creatively and I needed that outlet. So writing for me has been an outlet in functional places where my professional career hasn't allowed. And I've been really lucky that while it doesn't pay the bills, it does, afford me a couple lattes a week. So it's exciting.
That's so cool. I saw the link to your one of the blogs, but I didn't see your book on there. So, well, are you doing that purposefully to keep them separate?
So the book, I always joke as a marketer that was like, if I was doing a case study on why marketers aren't good at marketing themselves, that's it. Like I did zero PR. I did like maybe, $100 in social push. Like knowing what I know, it was like, I should do more. But I think for me, it was more about doing it and going through that experience versus generating income and making it a big deal. So for me, it was like I was a little bit too protective probably of it. But and my medium following is much more off short reading versus novels. So I try and cater to them more than anything.
That's really cool. I would like to have more hobbies, but I have 2 babies under the age of 3 right now. So
That's
I'm
amazing.
thinking eventually I'll have more hobbies when I'm not going back to school or taking care of children or worrying about being in good shape. So,
I would
but
say the writing thing was funny because I had just moved to New York and everyone was like, "How did you write a book in 6 months?" Honestly, it was a paragraph every night. So it's more about the like finding 30 minutes versus
yeah.
trying to do it all because that's,
Mhm.
like you said, it's impossible.
Yeah, when people find out that, well, I work full time, but then I also am in two classes a semester at UMSL, and then with my littles, and my husband also just opened a new business, so we just have a lot of moving parts all the time, and people are always like, "How do you do all that?" And then I get up early and go to the gym because
Yep.
otherwise it doesn't get done. I'm like, I don't really think about it as doing a lot of things, kind of like you're talking about writing the book, like it's just something like I every day this is what I plan to do and then I just do it. Like I don't even think past like the bigger concepts of it. But then I was like, on International Women's Day, a couple people had sent me messages like, "Hey, I see all that you're doing and it's pretty cool." And I was like, I never thought of someone like looking at me and saying like, "Wow," because I feel like I do that. Like looking at your career and your LinkedIn, I'm like, "Wow, that sounds so exciting," and just like I don't know, you've so accomplished so much to be in your 30s. So, it's just kind of cool, I guess, to have someone also have said that to me just because my life is very different. I feel like being an academic and all the other things. So,
That's
but
so
yeah,
cool.
so just to kind of wrap up, thinking about the conference again, if you were to give a new attendee some advice for the conference, what do you think that you would say to someone who's either professional or, a student attending the conference for the first time, especially with digital circumstance, which could be maybe a positive or a negative. So just kind of your input on that.
I felt like it was the same level of chaos when I was moderating because I was trying to go to a bunch of stuff and be in the room. So honestly, the way I did it and the way I would recommend is pick like 2 to 3 sessions and try and just be fully present for those 2 to 3 that really interest you versus trying to get to all of them. And then try when you're in them to create a unique opportunity to either connect with a member of the audience or connect with the speaker. And I think most of the speakers are really open to it. Now, granted, I'm not great at like checking my LinkedIn messages. So I say that and I say also be patient with me if you do reach out to me because I will. It just might take time. But I think it's more about being deeply present in a unique way once or twice versus trying to be everywhere. And I think we're learning that, right, in social and in COVID and everywhere else in our lives. But I definitely say it's the same for MDMC. Pick a few and try and uniquely interact.
That's awesome. Are you planning to try to, after looking at the schedule, try to attend any of the sessions as well?
I do. So the 2 that are on my mind are the power of podcasting and then the Facebook one on Beyond Broadcast, which is a mouthful apparently. But
Those
no, those
alliterations.
yeah, the 2 that were interesting to me just was just looking at the backgrounds of the individuals and going, they probably could teach me something for sure. And podcasting is one that like I've tried to do. We've tried to do a YouTube one. I just keep falling back into writing. So I'm kind of curious on it.
I definitely feel like podcasting is becoming more and more of a thing ever since also COVID, which I hate even using that word today. It's like you just don't even want to hear that word anymore, but it definitely is blowing up. So I think that would be great. I also feel like it's super advantageous that all the conference is going to be recorded. So
Yeah.
I know in Perry's class right now, we've been watching conference recordings from last spring. So it's been a really great tool to be able to look back and see those, where opposed to maybe in the past, you would have to be at the conference to really receive that same value. So I know that has been really informational for me as a student, but I think it would be a great tool for anyone who's like, I would like to look at this, but maybe I'm working or, whatever, they have that at that same time. So they're able to go back and check it
That's
out. So.
amazing. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. I feel like we had a great conversation thinking about, from a student perspective, and moving into also a professional industry perspective. And I didn't know if you had any last things you would like to add for our listeners, or other plugs for your session, or AV. So I'll go ahead and give you the opportunity to do that.
My only plug is go try Cacti, go try Ultra Seltzer, go drink Bud Light Seltzer Limited, because it's amazing if you're over 21. If you're not, if you're not over 21, I look forward to seeing you on the recordings, and thank you for your time.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. So again, Christina, thank you for your time and chatting with us today and helping us get pumped up and ready for the MDMC conference in just 41 days. Again, your session is going to be live broadcasted on April 28th at 3 p.m. Central Time, titled 3 Steps to Building a Brand Consumers Love. Definitely, whether you're in consumables or apparel, it just sounds like you're going to have some great tips for branding in general and really keeping that consumer at the forefront of their plans. So as a friendly reminder, the 2021 Midwest Digital Marketing Conference will run 100% digitally from April 26th through 29th. To find out more information about speakers like Christina Costello and discover various ticket offers, experiences offered, check us out online at bestmarketingconference.com. Super easy to remember. And the conference countdown is on. For our listeners, I would like to reiterate that this podcast was done 100% virtually, and that if you were able to watch the podcast, you can also check it out on the UMSL Business YouTube channel. Again, I'm Allie Helfrich, graduate student at UMSL, and my first inaugural podcast. So I'm so excited to have this one under my belt. And again, thank you for listening to this episode of In Your Business with UMSL Business. Please remember to wear a face mask, practice social distancing, and be safe, Tritons. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is In Your Business.
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 This is In Your Business with the UMSL Business Podcast.